Hello, everyone. Pierre will give you a short update on the program.
Yep. So good morning, everyone. We have two updates. We have one keynote that was added this afternoon at 5:30 by Lionel Obadia. And we have a second keynote with new guests who will give it tomorrow, Saturday at 3:30 by Kanta Dihal and Stephen Cave. I'm putting the link in the chat, who are going to talk about imagining AI, how the world sees intelligent machines, based on the book they published last year, AI Narratives, a History of Imaginative Thinking about Intelligent Machines at Oxford University Press. So we hope you can attend.
Okay, so the keynote of Lionel was scheduled yesterday. We had to cancel because of an ERC emergency. Okay, I'm happy to introduce Mélanie Dulong, who is chargée de recherche at CNRS, and she is director of the Centre Internet et Société, which is sponsoring our conference. She is also managing the Groupement de Recherche Internet, Intelligence Artificielle et Société, structuring the community of researchers in social and human sciences. Andrea Guadamuz is senior lecturer at University of Sussex, coming from Britain, and is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of World Intellectual Property. They both work on the law issue of AI, so we are happy to listen to them on this very important subject.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see, portion of the screen. Hopefully this will work. No.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to work together on this subject.
It's very nice. I think this is our first ever presentation together in Zoom. So thanks very much for the invitation. I always start presentations with an apology, and I need to change something or we won't be able to read. I always start with both a cat gif and an apology. The apology is going to be that this encompasses pretty much 3 different papers, and we're going to be dealing with subjects that we're going to pretty much be rushing through some of the main ideas of what we've been discussing about artificial intelligence and copyright in the last few years. So I know it's sort of funny to say that you're going to run out of time in a presentation where you don't have a lot of time, but this is it's important to stress that this is actually a very complex area. All right, and so feel free to come during the break this afternoon to ask questions about that.
Yeah, we'll be happy to answer to any questions about AI and law. The objective of the talk for us is to shed light on the 2 legal alternatives for AI. Copyright, where authors' rights are reserved, and the alternative of copyleft, where some rights are already shared with the public. It's close to the public domain, like Wikipedia. And with this talk, instead of having 3 lectures, we would rather like to stimulate a discussion with you about the ethical consequences of these choices. So on the one hand, the copyright ownership of works which are created by AI is not set, and this is what Andres is going to explain at the beginning. Neither is the use of pre-existing work to train AI algorithm or machine learning models. So this is our problematic.
All right. From the output perspective, this is just very brief. Generally, when we're talking about the ownership of works that have been generated with artificial intelligence, we do need to differentiate between the types of artificial intelligence that we are talking about. Generally speaking, this is something that is emerging in the literature. There are two types of artificial intelligence. There is what is known as transformative artificial intelligence, that is, the AI is acting to transform something that already exists. And generative AI, the AI is doing something new, it generates new works entirely. And this can be trying to imitate something that already exists, but generally speaking is something that is new, it doesn't really exist. I have a couple of examples of this. So for example, this is a good transformative AI. This is an artwork called Dreamscape by American artist Daniel Ambrosi. He takes photographs from, in this case, it's a photograph from Central Park, and he passes through it through Deep Dream, Google's Deep Dream, and the result is something that can be considered to be very beautiful, artistic. I love his art. This is an example of generative AI. It's one of my favorite examples. None of the cats that you see here exist. This is a machine learning program that has been taught what a cat looks like with thousands and thousands of pictures of cats on the internet, and it generates all of these new cats that actually do not exist, and that is what is considered generative AI. So from talking about the outputs, generally the intellectual property, particularly the copyright that is going to be in existence on these works. The law has a few options, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but the work can be considered to be in the public domain. That is, if there is no copyright due to no originality, no creativity, also because the authors are machines, but most importantly, because there is no originality or there is no creativity. And this is the situation that is in Europe. Then we have an option of no registration. That is the standard in the US. In the US, you need registration in order for you to be able to enforce your copyright. And we heard this yesterday that this is not possible in the US if a work has been generated by a computer. Then there is particularly some countries based in UK law and common law, where there is actually some protection that is given to the programmer or the user that has generated the creative work. It's a formulation that it was first found in UK copyright law and is now found in other common law countries like India, New Zealand, and Ireland, just to name a few. And this is that there is copyright as long as, and this copyright goes to the person that made the arrangements necessary for the work to be created. And then there is something that we generally consider to be sui generis rights, which is an entirely new right, much akin the database right that we have, or I'm saying we, I'm in the UK now, in Europe, exactly. There is a database right in Europe, and this is a right that doesn't exist. China is sort of moving in that direction, and Japan, there is a proposal for this.
Okay, so that was for the output, and copyright law applies by default the rules. Now, what about the input work and licensing? So just a quick point about Copyleft and free software and open source licensing. It's a legal hack for copyright where authors can decide to grant more rights to users. So the example is free, libre, and open source software, but also Creative Commons licenses. So instead of reserving all of their rights, which copyright law authorizes them to do, authors will decide to grant more freedom to potential users. And they can set several conditions. So for instance, that the derivative of their works, and that's very important, will remain free to all to build upon. So that's the concept of freedom. And Creative Commons licenses exist with several flavors, several conditions. They all require to attribute the name of the authors, and some reserve commercial rights.
Generally, what you can see with the input side is, for example, that free and open source software is using these licenses that are copyleft licenses, and usually there is a copyleft clause that is also called the share alike clause, that you will release modified versions of your work with the same license with which you received them. This can be important for artificial intelligence. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, because this freedom is viral, will be transmitted with your work along the chain when it gets transformed. So now, one of the big controversies in the free and open licensing world was to introduce some restriction to this freedom for, so this was called the moral clause, because some developers were very happy with granting freedoms to reusers, but they would like to prohibit the use of their software, of their work, for purposes which they would not approve, such as military or Nazi.
So, for example, they started creating this clause that if you are going to use open source software and copyleft software particularly to generate software that is going to be used, for example, by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that would not be allowed. So anyone else in the world would be able to use the software, but not them. So this actually included Microsoft, Palantir, Amazon, Xerox, and the community reacted. It was a bit controversial because you cannot enter ethics into the licensing. The ethics that can be included in copyleft is for non-commercial uses, but not something that would restrict the use, because some people see it as a bit of a slippery slope. And that brings us to artificial intelligence. What does artificial intelligence have to do with this?
Yes, because programmers can decide to use Creative Commons licensed pictures to train their creation machine learning algorithm. So this is where Copyleft is entering AI creativity.
So a very well-documented case is that IBM has a database. By the way, they've pulled it very recently. I think that because of some of the controversies that were happening. This database took photographs from Flickr that were under a Creative Commons license, and they looked for faces of diverse people, because as everyone knows, artificial intelligence has a problem with diversity because it's been trained with mostly with white people. So what IBM, the idea was actually sort of good, that say we need more diverse people, we need more diverse data sets to train our artificial intelligence. So they found a big trove of pictures that were under a CC license. And then they got this, and then they started training and offering this for people to train their artificial intelligence. The problem, and some people saw this as a problem, was that this software would potentially be used to discriminate against the people that were being presented. So it would actually be used to repress the same communities that were being represented.
And so this is our last slide, where we try to merge the legal and the ethical questioning. So in the same way, we try to explain that freedom and Creative Commons licenses can be slightly restricted. For instance, there's a clause to reserve commercial rights. would it be possible to have an ethical or fair AI clause? So this is what we wanted to bring to the discussion.
Yeah, the idea would be to use outright forbid unethical uses or use codes of conduct, for example, that would be included in the license. So, for example, it would be worded in a way like you will comply with X code of conduct when using our works to train artificial intelligence. So, for example, something along the lines of you must cause any work that you distribute or publish that in whole or in part contains or is derived from this program or any part thereof to comply with transparency principles contained in this license. And this would be a new sort of ethical copyleft clause.
And
that's it.
That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And let's stop sharing.
Thank you for succeeding to keep your time. Maybe we can take just one or two questions because your violent synthesis on this complex topic on 10 minutes or 12 minutes was just perfect.
Yes, as we're saying, there are 3 papers here actually.
Three papers in 10 minutes.
3 papers in 10 minutes. So we had to compress quite a lot of
yeah, no,
knowledge.
that's just the last paper, but we had to explain a bit.
Explain a little bit of the background of the start.
To non-lawyers.
Is at least two papers, exactly.
Or maybe we can wait until the Wonder pause today for
I think
going
Louis has a
further.
question.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
Louis Rouillet has a question.
Right. Hi. Thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. I was wondering if you can explain maybe the difference between different programs, because Google, we know that it copies everything that goes through their server, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the artist using Google to transform a painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he may try to copyright his thing, but the thing is copied into Google all the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one strategy would be to, maybe, I don't know if it exists in the literature, but one strategy would be to have a viral copyleft built into the program, meaning that everything that the program transforms, gets the copyleft licensing. So does this exist? Is it a sort of a...
That's a really, really interesting potential. Now, the thing with Google's Deep Dream program, for example, is that Google is not interested whatsoever in copyright, in copyrighting anything that Google is in one business and one business only, which is artificial intelligence, is training their AI. That's it. They don't care about the outputs at all. They don't care about the copyright, and we have it in good authority. We have a couple of we know people who are in that sphere. Let's put it that way. And they're not interested. So they could do it, but they won't do it because they want as few restrictions. Because they want inputs. They want as much of our data. So that's where all this viral stuff comes in, that's where Deep Dream comes in. We are actually giving free data to Google. They could do it. And I can see that's a really interesting potential that you would build into the license that produces the output. You would build the ethical considerations. I can definitely see that happening. The only it would have to be done by the authors, much like Creative Commons is done. The only problem that I would see with doing it with the platforms themselves is that we would be recognizing that the platform has any copyright over what we give them. And I don't want this to happen. So, but your fantastic question. I can definitely see that, happening.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.